I couldn't be more grateful that they thought of me to come and do that, but I'm only getting to do it because of something sad that happened with the passing of Glenn.
At 67, Vince Gill is not just a celebrated country music icon. He's stepping into one of the most revered roles in rock history. The moment the call came from the Eagles, a band whose anthems have defined generations, his life was forever altered. But this wasn't merely about joining a legendary group. It was about honoring the enduring legacy of Glenn Frey, a founding member whose influence still echoes through every note and lyric. What does it feel like for Vince to navigate the skepticism of passionate fans while carrying the weight of such a monumental responsibility? Join us on a captivating journey as we peel back the layers of Vince Gill's untold story, revealing the emotional highs and lows behind his courageous decision to join the Eagles. Discover what it truly means to uphold a musical legacy and how one man's passion can bridge the past and present in the world of music. Early life. Vince Gill was born on April 12, 1957 in Norman, Oklahoma, a small town that would become the foundation of his early life and musical journey. His father, J. Stanley Gill, was a lawyer by profession but also a part-time musician. Stanley's love for music, particularly country and bluegrass, deeply influenced Vince from an early age. Stanley would often play the banjo and guitar around the house, filling their home with the sounds of the music he loved. His mother, Jareen Gill, was a homemaker who kept the family close-knit and supportive, encouraging Vince to pursue his interests. An important figure in Vince's early years was his older half-brother, Bob Gill. Bob was a significant musical influence on Vince, exposing him to a variety of genres and styles. Bob played guitar and had a major impact on young Vince, sparking his interest in learning to play. Vince's interest in music took root early, particularly in instruments like the guitar and banjo, which were central to the kind of music his father loved. By the time he was a teenager, Vince was already dedicated to honing his craft. His high school years saw him joining various local bands, most notably the bluegrass band Mountain Smoke. This group allowed him to experiment with blending traditional bluegrass sounds with elements of rock, which was gaining popularity at the time. Mountain Smoke developed a strong local following, and Vince started to gain recognition as a talented musician. Throughout his school years, Vince was an active participant in local talent shows and music competitions, which not only helped him improve his technical skills, but also built his confidence as a performer. By the time he graduated, it was clear that music was more than just a hobby. It was something Vince was determined to pursue on a larger scale. A pivotal moment in Vince Gill's early life came with the loss of his older brother Bob in a tragic car accident. Bob had been Vince's musical hero and a guiding force in his life. Losing him was a devastating blow, and it profoundly affected Vince's outlook on life and music. This tragedy brought a new depth to his music, as he began to channel his emotions and grief into his performances and songwriting. The loss of Bob made Vince more determined to succeed, carrying the memory of his brother with him as he moved forward in his career. This personal tragedy not only shaped his emotional resilience, but also brought a deeper sense of purpose to his music, which would continue to resonate throughout his career. Solo career. After finishing high school in the mid-1970s, Vince Gill left his hometown in Oklahoma and moved to Louisville, Kentucky. It was a big step for a young musician who was ready to dive deeper into the world of bluegrass. Louisville had a strong bluegrass scene, and it wasn't long before Vince became involved with a local group called Bluegrass Alliance. This band had already built a reputation for itself, and joining them gave Vince valuable experience performing live and working with skilled musicians. Playing with Bluegrass Alliance allowed Vince to develop his unique style. While the band focused on traditional bluegrass, Vince's musical interests were broader. He blended bluegrass with elements of country and rock, giving his sound a fresh and modern twist. This mix would later become a hallmark of his music, as he was never content to be boxed into one genre. In the late 1970s, Vince's big break came when he joined the country rock band Pure Prairie League. The group had already achieved some success, but when their lead singer left, they were searching for a new frontman. Vince stepped into the role and soon became the band's lead vocalist. His clear, smooth voice fit their blend of country, pop, and rock, and he quickly made an impression. One of his most notable contributions during his time with the band was the hit song "Let Me Love You Tonight." Released in 1980, the track became a top 10 hit on the Billboard charts and introduced Vince to a wider audience. This success showed that Vince was more than just a talented bluegrass musician. He could navigate the world of mainstream country pop and rock just as easily. By the early 1980s, Vince was ready for a change and moved to Los Angeles. In LA, he started building a name for himself as a session musician. For those unfamiliar, a session musician is hired to play instruments or sing on other artists' records. It's a demanding job because it requires a musician to be versatile, professional, and able to fit into any style of music. Vince's abilities as a guitarist and vocalist made him a sought-after session player. He worked with a variety of well-known musicians, most notably Emmylou Harris and her band, the Hot Band. Playing with Emmylou's group exposed Vince to some of the best musicians in the industry, and he soaked up valuable lessons on stage presence, performance, and musicianship. This experience helped him learn how to blend different musical styles seamlessly, which would later be one of his trademarks. In 1983, Vince took the next step in his career by signing a solo deal with RCA Records. He was eager to prove himself as a solo artist, but the road wasn't easy. His first few albums, while showing flashes of his talent, didn't immediately lead to stardom. Songs like Turn Me Loose and Victim of Life's Circumstances received some attention, but they didn't make Vince a household name. During this time, Vince faced the usual struggles of a young solo artist trying to break into the highly competitive country music scene. While he had built a solid reputation as a session player and band member, finding his footing as a solo act took time. It wasn't until a few years later that his solo career truly began to take off. Despite the challenges, Vince's commitment to his craft never wavered, and each album laid the groundwork for the larger success that was just around the corner. These early years were a crucial period of growth for Vince. Every band, session, and recording project added a new layer to his skill set, ultimately shaping him into the versatile and accomplished artist he would become. The golden years. The 1990s marked Vince Gill's most successful years as a solo artist, with album after album delivering hit songs that resonated with fans and critics alike. In 1991, he released Pocket Full of Gold, an album that helped solidify his presence on the country music charts. The title track, Pocket Full of Gold, along with singles like Liza Jane and Look at Us, became fan favorites, showing off Vince's smooth vocals and heartfelt lyrics. However, it was his 1992 album, I Still Believe in You, that took his career to the next level. The album produced some of Vince's biggest hits, including the emotional ballad I Still Believe in You, which topped the country charts and became one of his signature songs. Other singles from the album, like Don't Let Our Love Start Slippin' Away and One More Last Chance, were equally successful, dominating the airwaves and turning Vince into a household name in country music. These songs captured the perfect blend of traditional country storytelling with a modern, polished sound, making them popular with a wide audience. The 1990s were not just about chart success for Vince. They were also a time when he received widespread recognition from his peers in the music industry. His ability to craft emotionally rich songs, coupled with his exceptional guitar skills, led him to sweep multiple Grammy Awards and Country Music Association CMA Awards during this decade. His song When I Call Your Name had already earned him his first Grammy in 1990, but the awards kept coming as his career soared. The Phone Call. Vince Gill had spent decades as one of country music's most beloved stars. With his soulful voice and incredible guitar skills, He had earned countless awards, hit songs, and a dedicated fan base. By the time he was in his mid-60s, Vince had reached a point in his career where he had accomplished almost everything he could as a solo artist. But even after all those years of success, he started to feel like something was changing. He had been performing his own music for so long that he found himself wondering what was next. Was it time to try something new? Or should he stick to what he knew best? It was an ordinary day, just like any other, when Vince's phone rang. He wasn't expecting any major news or surprises, but when he answered, everything changed. On the other end of the line was Irving Azoff, the longtime manager of the Eagles, one of the biggest rock bands in history. Vince had known Irving for years, but had no idea what this call was about. What Irving said next stunned him. The Eagles wanted Vince to join the band. They were asking him to take on a role that no one could have seen coming, filling the shoes of Glenn Frey, one of the Eagles' founding members who had passed away in 2016. Frey wasn't just any band member. He was a crucial part of what made the Eagles so special. His voice, songwriting, and presence had helped define their sound for decades. At first, Vince thought the call had to be a joke. The Eagles were legends. Why would they want him to step into such an iconic role? But it didn't take long for him to realize that Irving wasn't kidding. The offer was real, and the band was serious about bringing Vince on board. They trusted him to help carry on the legacy that Glenn had left behind. Vince's first reaction was a mix of disbelief and deep respect. He had always admired the Eagles from afar. They were one of the most iconic bands in the world, with music that had touched millions of fans over the years. To be asked to join them, especially to fill a space left by Glenn Frey, felt like both an incredible honor and an enormous responsibility. As the reality of the situation started to sink in, Vince found himself asking, "Why me?" He knew he had the musical talent to contribute. His guitar skills and voice would fit in with the Eagles' style. But stepping into Glenn Frey's shoes was about more than just music. Glenn had been a key part of the band's heart and soul, and Vince knew that no one could truly replace him. The idea of trying to live up to such a legacy was intimidating, even for someone as accomplished as Vince. Still, Vince couldn't help but feel humbled. Being invited into such an exclusive group wasn't something he took lightly. He understood the significance of what was being asked of him, and he felt a deep sense of duty to honor Glenn's memory and to respect what the Eagles had built over their decades-long career. This wasn't just a new gig. It was a chance to be part of something much bigger than himself. As Vince joined the band, he couldn't shake the feeling of walking in Glenn's shadow. He was constantly aware of the emotional significance of what he was doing. Every note he sang and every chord he played felt like it carried extra weight. He didn't want to disappoint Glenn's fans or his bandmates, and he wanted to make sure he was doing justice to the legacy Glenn had built. It wasn't just about playing the songs well. It was about honoring the spirit behind them. Skepticism from fans. Even though Vince was excited and honored to join the Eagles, he knew that not everyone would feel the same way. Glenn Frey's passing had left a deep impact on the band's fans, and many of them were skeptical about anyone stepping into his role, no matter how talented. From the moment the news broke that Vince would be joining the Eagles, reactions were mixed. Some fans were supportive and excited to see what Vince would bring to the group, but others were far less welcoming. Some fans found it challenging to imagine anyone stepping into Glenn Frey's place. Glenn had been a part of the Eagles from the very beginning, and for many, he was the Eagles. People wondered if the band could ever be the same without him. Social media lit up with debates, some fans criticizing the decision, while others voiced cautious optimism. Vince understood why some people had doubts. He knew how much Glenn meant to them, and he shared that respect for Glenn's legacy. Vince felt the weight of skepticism during rehearsals and performances. Vince knew that people were watching and listening closely, looking for any sign that he wasn't living up to their expectations. It wasn't just about performing well. It was about proving that he could fit into a role that no one thought could be filled. For Vince, this meant constantly balancing the need to stay true to himself while also respecting the band's history and the fans' attachment to Glenn. For Vince, one of the biggest challenges in joining the Eagles was figuring out how to strike the right balance. On one hand, he wanted to bring his own style and voice to the band. After all, they had asked him to join for a reason. But on the other hand, he knew that the Eagles had a sound and a history that needed to be respected. The fans weren't just there to see Vince Gill, they were there to hear the Eagles, and they expected the songs to sound the way they always had. This created an internal struggle for Vince. He had spent his entire career as a solo artist, calling the shots and performing music that was uniquely his. Now, he was part of a band with a long-established identity. He had to find a way to blend his voice with the Eagles' harmonies, to fit into the music without overshadowing it or changing it too much. Every decision, from how he sang Glenn's parts to how he played the guitar, was carefully considered. Vince wanted to stay true to himself, but he also wanted to respect the band's legacy and the expectations of their die-hard fans. It wasn't always easy. There were times when Vince questioned if he was doing enough or if he was trying too hard to imitate Glenn. He had to remind himself that he was chosen for a reason and that he needed to trust his instincts. Don Henley and the rest of the band had faith in him, and over time, Vince began to settle into the role. He realized that the key wasn't to try to replace Glenn, but to honor him by bringing his own talents to the music and helping the Eagles move forward while still paying tribute to their past, learning the dynamics. While the Eagles were known for their flawless harmonies and smooth performances, Vince soon realized that their outward harmony masked deeper tensions. Behind the scenes, the band had its share of conflicts, both old and new. The Eagles had been through decades of ups and downs, from breakups to personal losses, and those experiences left behind emotional scars that hadn't fully healed. At first, Vince tried to observe quietly, watching how the band interacted during rehearsals and downtime. What he saw was a group of musicians who, despite their history, still had unresolved issues bubbling beneath the surface. There were moments when everything seemed fine, but then a disagreement over something as small as a song arrangement could quickly escalate. Vince noticed how old tensions between Don and Joe would flare up during these moments, even though they'd been playing together for so long. The creative process was often the source of these conflicts. The Eagles had always been known for their meticulous attention to detail, and every decision, whether it was about a guitar riff or vocal harmony, was scrutinized. Vince quickly realized that while this perfectionism was what made the Eagles great, it also made for a challenging environment. There was little room for mistakes or experimentation, and this high-pressure atmosphere weighed heavily on Vince, who was already feeling the strain of being the new guy. What surprised Vince the most was how, despite these tensions, the band still managed to come together on stage. Their ability to perform seamlessly in front of thousands of fans, even when things weren't perfect behind the scenes, showed just how professional they were. But the more Vince got to know the band, the more he understood that their long history together was both their greatest strength and their greatest burden. Almost walking away. Tensions within the band escalated during one rehearsal. It started off as a simple disagreement over a song arrangement. Vince, hoping to contribute something fresh, suggested a slight change to one of the Eagles' classic songs. What he thought was a small tweak quickly turned into a heated debate. Don, Joe, and Timothy all had strong opinions, and the conversation escalated faster than Vince expected. Before he knew it, voices were raised, and the rehearsal room felt charged with frustration. Vince suddenly felt like an outsider, caught between his desire to contribute and the weight of the band's complex history. He felt misunderstood and frustrated. The tension in the room was thick, and Vince perceived a sense of strain among his bandmates. At that moment, Vince felt uncertain about his ability to continue with the Eagles. He had always known that joining such a legendary band would be difficult, but he hadn't anticipated how emotionally draining it would be. For years, he had been used to calling the shots in his solo career, making decisions without having to answer to anyone else. Now, he was in a situation where every creative choice felt like a battle, and he wasn't sure if he could keep up with the constant push and pull of the band's dynamic. Later that day, Vince found himself alone, reflecting on everything that had led up to that moment. He had given so much of himself to the band, trying to find the right balance between honoring their legacy and bringing his own unique sound. But now he felt stuck, torn between his love for the Eagles' music and the growing conflicts behind the scenes. For a brief moment, he considered walking away. Leaving would mean going back to the comfort of his solo career, where he had control over his music. But it would also mean giving up on the chance to be part of something bigger. Vince stayed with the Eagles, not because it was easy, but because he believed in the music and the legacy they were carrying forward. His decision to stay, even during the hardest times, not only solidified his place in the band, but also strengthened the bond between him and his bandmates. In the end, the creative tensions that almost pushed Vince away became the very thing that brought the Eagles closer together. Don Henley's intervention. After the intense rehearsal where Vince almost walked away, Don could see that something needed to change. Vince had been carrying the weight of stepping into Glenn Frey's shoes, and the pressure from both fans and the band's internal dynamics had started to take its toll on him. Sensing that Vince was close to his breaking point, Don decided it was time for a private, candid conversation. The talk between Don and Vince wasn't a formal meeting. It was a quiet moment between two musicians who respected each other. Away from the tension of the rehearsal space, Don reached out to Vince with understanding. He didn't sugarcoat the situation. He acknowledged that being a part of the Eagles wasn't easy, especially for someone in Vince's position, stepping into a band with decades of history. But Don also wanted Vince to know that his presence mattered, not just as a musician, but as a person. Don was clear in expressing that Vince wasn't just a stand-in for Glenn Frey. He was valued for his own talent and what he brought to the band musically. Vince's voice and guitar had already left a mark on the Eagles' sound, and Don wanted him to realize that his contributions were respected. He also addressed the frustrations that Vince had been feeling, particularly the creative tensions and the struggle to find his place within the established group. Don emphasized that these struggles were a part of the process, but they didn't mean that Vince wasn't an essential part of the band's future. This conversation was a turning point for Vince. Don's words reassured him that despite the challenges, he belonged in the Eagles. It wasn't just about filling a role, it was about being part of the band's legacy and helping shape its next chapter. The talk allowed Vince to feel heard and understood, and it opened up a space for honest communication between him and Don, something that had been missing amidst all the pressure. After that heart-to-heart with Don, Vince felt a sense of relief. The doubts that had been gnawing at him started to fade, replaced by a renewed confidence in his place within the band. This moment represented an important change for both Vince and the Eagles. It was the first time Vince truly felt like he wasn't just an outsider stepping into someone else's shoes, but a full member of the group. The conversation didn't magically fix everything overnight, but it did shift the atmosphere within the band. Vince's decision to stay, after almost walking away, showed his commitment to the Eagles, and the rest of the band recognized that. There was a new sense of unity, a shared understanding that, while things might not always be smooth, they were all in it together. This turning point wasn't just about avoiding a breakup or patching over creative differences. It was about reaffirming the band's shared dedication to their music. Don's intervention helped remind everyone, Vince included, of why they were there in the first place. It wasn't just about personal dynamics or disagreements. It was about the music that had brought them all together. Gentle transformation. Vince's arrival didn't transform the Eagles overnight, but his contributions brought a soft, reflective quality to many of their classic songs. Take Peaceful Easy Feeling, for example. It's always been a song that embodies the laid-back, easy-going spirit of the Eagles, but when Vince sang it, there was a deeper tenderness in his voice. His approach brought out the reflective side of the song, emphasizing its peaceful and nostalgic qualities even more. Songs like Lionize and Desperado also took on a slightly different tone with Vince's influence. While the original versions were sharp and full of emotional grit, Vince's style smoothed out some of the edges. He brought a gentleness to these performances that allowed listeners to hear them in a new light. His ability to infuse a softer emotion into the band's music didn't change the core of the songs, but it offered a different kind of intimacy, one that fans appreciated as a modern take on beloved classics. Vince's contributions can be described as a gentle transformation. He didn't come in and try to reinvent the Eagles' sound. That was never his goal. Instead, he found ways to make the songs his own while still respecting their history. His presence in the band didn't overshadow the past, but it did help carry it forward, evolving the Eagles' music in a way that felt natural and heartfelt. Vince Gill has finally opened up about his time with the Eagles, sharing the highs and lows of stepping into such a legendary band. From feeling like an outsider to almost quitting, Vince's journey was filled with challenges, but through it all, his deep respect for Glenn Frey's legacy and his love for the music kept him going. Vince's story shows us that even in the face of doubt, passion, and dedication can help us push through. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe for more stories like this. Let us know in the comments what you think about Vince's time with the Eagles.